Welcome back to the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 108. Now, we are both a creative podcast and MMA as well, but I think we should start with the latter because we have a whole host of news, fights, everything in between to talk about, and I feel like the most logical place to start is the upcoming card of UFC 317 because I feel like it's the first time in a while we've got 5 fights that are just stacked across the board. And some people might disagree with that opinion, but I think if you look stylistically at those matchups, not in terms of name value, you've just got banger after banger after banger. And I want your initial thoughts if we start from the top of the main event, which is, of course, the return of El Matador, Ilia Topuria, moving up to lightweight to challenge for the vacant throne against Chalas Doublons Oliveira. Give me your 2 cents.
My original thought is the exact one it was a few months out or whenever this was announced. Firstly, it wasn't the most exciting fight to be made with Ilia Topuria. That was Islam Makhachev. We have to be clear about that. So it's not the number one if I'm going to be picky. Stylistically, intriguing. And from a narrative perspective, intriguing. Because Ilia Topuria is that undefeated guy. He does have that overused word, but aura. He has the ability to switch people off, and he has the ability to submit them and send them to sleep. So it is very interesting because Charles has shown that he's someone just to spoil plans and write his own stories. And who knows when it's going to take another weird turn and tail. And it just feels like it might be one of those moments.
No,
it
not.
Just might be. Do I look at this and think probability-wise, more times than not out of 10, I go with Ilia Topuria? 100%. And that's exactly where I'm going. And I'm sure we can dive into it a little bit more, but that's my sentiment. I'm excited. But regardless about the rest of the card, just to round that off, I guess, fun matchups, interesting storylines coming into it. A couple of sort of old heads looking for new position, a few prospects, Joshua Vans, a fun storyline building up to Brandon Royval. Pantoja, is he finally going to drop off the shelf, or does he just prove everyone why putting him at £8 for pound is disgraceful?
It is vile.
Oh, vile. Disgraceful. Come on, don't do my boy.
You're right. I think what you're saying about the old versus the old versus young sentiment, I feel like that's kind of the common theme running through that card in a lot of ways. Mainly through the top 3 fights, if you look at it. I mean, Joshua Van, I didn't realize how young he was. I knew he was, a bit of a prospect coming up, maybe being pushed a little bit too quick. The man's only 23. He's a few months older than me. Like, doing this, just to put that into perspective, I mean, and Brandon Royval is getting on a fair bit, and obviously he's had a lot of mileage in the UFC, and that does play a factor. And, of course, the same can be said for Pantoja when he fights Kai Kara France in the co-main event. But I wanted to give my firm prediction on the main event, Topuria versus Charles Oliveira, because I, for the first time in a while, have been so firm on a stance, and I just cannot be budged from it. I really can't, because I said this on stream on my channel. I've been so vocal on this, and I feel like I've managed to sway a lot of people into the same sort of sentiment. I think this is just going to be a brutalization early. I think when you look stylistically, the way Charles Oliveira fights, the way this matchup is going to go, it's fire meets fire, right? And Oliveira has never been a man with the greatest defense. If we're being frank, if we're being honest, that's kind of what makes him entertaining in a lot of ways. But he is very much hittable. He's very much hittable. And Ilia Topuria is the man to find that chin, and he will do it very early. And I'm honestly, mixed martial arts at the best of times is an unceremonious and brutal game. And I think that's exactly what we're going to see. And it's going to be a first round finish. That right hand is going to find the chin early. And it's going to, honestly, within 3 minutes, I think we're going to have Charles Oliveira on the canvas. And despite the fact he's known as being a man who's able to recover and get back to his feet and find victory from the jaws of defeat, I just don't think that's going to be the case against Ilia Topuria. I really don't. I think it's going to be a brutalization. And that comes from someone who's a fan of both men. So it's just my honest thoughts. It's what my brain is saying, it's what my heart is saying, it's what my gut is saying. So Ilia Topuria with the first round knockout, but not ruling out a submission either. I think that's something to put into perspective. If you look at his earlier career outside of the UFC and where he started his mixed martial arts roots, they began in Greco-Roman wrestling and jiu-jitsu. And he's got a great amount of submissions on his resume. So don't rule that out either, especially against a guy, I mean, even so, against a guy like Charles Oliveira, who is a grappling phenom in pretty much every way possible. But yeah, Ilia Topuria for me, 2-weight champion inbound.
thorough, passionate. It's sounding like an interesting headline to the start of that. Regardless, the reason I say that is because I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying. I don't
I'm
think
waiting for
that's
the
out of
bar.
the question. I actually believe Ilia Topuria does win this. But if you're going to paint such an opinionated piece on one side, you must also have at least somebody to represent where it could go in the right direction for Charles Oliveira, because you may be right, but we cannot act as if there is no chance. So if there is a chance, let's look at what that chance is. First and foremost, Ilia Topuria does all of his best work where? On the front foot. He does it backing his opponents up against the cage. He does it cutting the cage off. He does it with simple boxing combinations and calf kicks to then get them flat, if in prime position in the pillar, and then land his boxing combinations. However, he hasn't been troubled much on the feet in his MMA pro career, but how has he been troubled if it's happened? On the back foot. What are some attacks that he's used? Okay, or been susceptible to? A left high kick, twice. So there's at least something we can look at that. Just something, because the man is almost perfect. We need to look at something. He wears incredible turtlenecks. He smells incredible. He's very sharp.
That's from
And he knocks
first-hand
people's
experience
out.
as well, can we just say?
That's
You've been
elevator
there.
experience, right? So that's a smell gauge very intimately.
He
Smells
does look like
incredible.
that, to be fair. If I had to guess, I would have said the same thing, even without being in the same room with him. He does look like he smells good.
Dolce Gabbana front covers with his misses. Of course he smells good. Regardless, the reason I say that is because where he has shown cracks is on the back foot. And on top of that is the left high kick. But then on top of that, if we just look at maybe where he hasn't even necessarily shown cracks, but what his style looks like, we can take away a couple of potential weaknesses. Now, everything has a caveat, everything has a counter, of course. He has quite a boxing heavy stance. So where there's pros to that, he's able to slip and see shots really nicely and counter and well balanced and be powerful. There's also some cons to that. He's a little bit wider in stance. That front leg is a little bit more available for Charles Oliveira's own calf kick, or a technique we've actually seen a lot of times, which is the lead oblique kick or the rear oblique kick to that front leg. Saw against Michael Chandler. Not the same caliber of striker, but the same sort of look and
Good point.
stance as Ilia Topuria. Next, if he uses that teep, which he always uses. He doesn't fight like a long fighter, but he does use longer weapons at times. Teeps to the middle. Ilia Topuria does have a little bit more of a bladed stance. The midsection is there. Head hunting is difficult because he's so good at seeing the shots coming. Even if he just lands one or two, now you're starting to disrupt the distance and the rhythm a little bit of Ilia. So now you're starting to maybe take away the jabber touch and then maybe also take away the calf kick. So maybe now he's not winning every exchange and he does get backed up a couple of times. And Charles Oliveira, like I said, is taller, but he actually closes distance as the taller fighter. So maybe he goes flying switch knee into the clinch. And I think Ilia is more dangerous in a ways in the clinch. But Charles Oliveira has slightly more weapons and he does have that plum clinch, boom, straight up the middle. And he does have elbows. And once you start showing a lot of weapons up the middle, Charles has got a few more tools in the clinch. He may not be as threatening, as damaging as Ilia's hands, but he does have tools. He does have flipping knees and elbows, things that Ilia's not really going to show. So if he can get him going against the age, I think he can have
I
success.
understand that argument, but I feel like you can say this exact same thing about a lot of the guys that Topuria has faced. Like, I feel like Volkanovski is a good example, not necessarily the same
You're missing the point.
structure and anatomy, but you're talking about the variety of weapons, right? Ilia Topuria, we've always known he's not a man. He's in terms of his game plan, you always know what he's going to do. It's just a matter of being able to stop it. As you described it perfectly, using the calf kicks, getting them a bit more flat-footed and sort of escorting them to the pillar of the cage before setting up the boxing. He does it to everyone he faces, but no one can really deal with that. And I just don't see a world where Charles Oliveira is able to consistently back him up onto the back foot, which you are right. I will say that is the window where Topuria is at his weakest. You're saying he doesn't need to. You think Charles Oliveira can win the fight off the back foot? Because
No, you're not. He doesn't need to do it. What you said, consistently. He doesn't need to do it consistently. He just has to do it successfully, maybe once, because that's the type of fighter that Charles Oliveira is. That's exactly my point. My point here is not to tell you it's the wrong analysis of you thinking the other way. My point is not to paint a picture favorable for either person. I'm just saying if there were times he was going to have success, it would be within that. Now, can he execute that? I'm not sure if he can consistently, but I think he does have the tools to do that. He just needs to do it once. He's got the most finishes in the UFC. What? And now we think he has to do it over 25 minutes. I don't think so. So, sure, I am betting against him, but it's always with caution with Charles Oliveira because he is very capable, of course.
I think we've seen that. And I think if there's one thing we can pretty much fully rule out is that this fight, well, I mean, we can't fully rule out. We know how unpredictable mixed martial arts is, probably more than any other sport, but I cannot, and I'm sure you'd agree with me here, see a realm where this goes to the scorecards. I really, really can't, because they both have so many. The finishing pedigree of both men is what I'm getting at. Is just pretty much unparalleled in that division. To be honest with you, the entire roster, excluding the top heavyweights. So with that in mind, I'm going to go, as I said before, reaffirm my stance. Charles Oliveira definitely has a chance, as you said, but Ilia Topuria via first round finish, unceremonious and brutal and visceral. What's your 2 cents? Give me that prediction.
My 2 cents is a side tangent. I told you about that MMA outlet that hit me up and said, can I give him some predictions over a few weeks, and he was going to run a league. And usually I say no, but he has been...
And you've been flying.
A very good supporter, and he's always bought different things from the shop and whatnot, so I always appreciate that. So I did it with him, and I've just flipping turned his corner. I've gone full beast mode. I just didn't think much of it. I don't always have amazing weeks, but 4-5 on the spin. I've just been absolutely nailing them. And I've been first every single week. And I pretty much got everyone bang on this week. It was kind of shocking.
Really? What, for Baku?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, let's see if you can reaffirm that. Or, sorry, that's not the word to use, but double up on it, let's say. What's your... Put your money, not your money where your mouth is, but make your statement. Stake your claim.
I am going Ilia Topuria, second round TKO.
That's not a bad shout. Honestly, I like the sound of a second round TKO sounds more plausible than a first, if we're being real. Ilia Topuria, as we said earlier, is a man to set up the combinations to find the finish. Man. But I'm sticking with my original prediction, first round finish. And I think the only thing at the bare minimum we can hope for is a damn fun fight, and I don't see a realm where we're not getting that. And I think very much the same can be said for the co-main event. You know, I said earlier about this card being stacked in terms of stylistic matchups. Pantoja, Kai Kara-France. I mean, the former is a man who will just bring the fight regardless, and he's going to make it entertaining in a division which sorely needs it, or probably has the perception of being unexciting and boring. He's the man who's just always proving that wrong every time he fights, because he's an absolute dog in the cage, and he might not be the most technically gifted, but he finds a way to win, and that is just an intangible quality you need as a champion, and he has it probably more than anyone. And I think that's part of the reason why at his age he's continuing to do so well, is because he's able to turn fights into a less technical affair. Because at his age, you know, the speed and reaction time might be just faltering a little bit. It's just a natural progression of being an athlete. But he's able to, like Kamaru Usman we saw a couple of weeks ago, neutralize those weaknesses with his strengths. And I think he's going to do the same thing again to Kai Kara-France. And if I'm not mistaken, have they fought before? You might have to back on maybe the Ultimate Fighter or something.
I'm pretty sure, because he's fought even in everyone in this division. That's the thing about Pantoja. That's why I told you it was disrespectful to put him at 8. Am I wrong?
No, I very much agree. Me and my stream chat are very vocal in that opinion. Very.
The thing about Pantoja I just find impressive is not just the fact that he's winning and continuing to beat guys that he's already beaten, but it's the fact that he's just getting a little bit better each time as well, and that's not always the case. And of course, he's coming towards the end of his physical prime, and his fighting career, that's not a secret. But what he's probably losing a touch in speed and maybe even resilience to a certain degree, he makes up for it with actually improved skills. And then, of course, the XP every time he goes out there and gets another win, gains the confidence and gains the cage time as well. So I think this should be a routine win for Pantoja, but it's very rare that a flyweight does have actual knockout ability. And if there was one small hole in his game, it would be a little bit the case that he gets hit too often. But even recently, he's not really been. That's the thing, right? So I'm going to lean towards Pantoja on this one. What are you thinking?
I'm with you, but not with any sense of certainty.
No.
Kakar France is an animal, man. That Steve Ursay finish really impressed me because I think if you go back and watch that fight, as soon as that sort of the bell chimed, we got that first round going, you could immediately see that finish was not a matter of if, it was just a matter of when. The way him and his team had set up that right hand, you could see he got close a couple of times, and from that point on, you just knew it was coming. And then sure enough, that exact same sequence, I mean, knocking out Steve Ursig, he did, I don't know exactly what round it was, but he did it in a hell of a lot shorter time than Pantoja did in taking it to the scorecards. And I know MMA math isn't the best way of analyzing things. It never is. But as you said, it's very rare that we have a flyweight who has KO power and is able to just end fights early. And with Pantoja, who is, as you said, getting to the end of his career, there is definitely a route here for Kakar France. And Michael Bisping said it best. I don't know the exact words. No two fights are the same. And he proved that to a T at UFC 199. There's a good chance that Kakar France could do the very same here. But I am going to pick Alexandre Pantoja. I think he will grind him down and eventually find that submission. I think the rear naked choke is his patented tool. It's his patented submission. I think another one of those. It's, again, a great fight, though. If we're talking objectively, which is what we want. We want fun fights, especially in this era where the UFC, in a lot of ways, is perhaps not at its best in recent memory. Fun fights, we need them, and that is definitely one of them. And I'm with you, Pantoja by submission. How are you feeling about a potential outcome?
Do you just think Kakar France's biggest danger is also sometimes his weakness? If he does go out there and spams 100 right hands. Now, I know it's not as simple as that. There is obviously skill to it, and he is setting them up to a certain degree, but he does throw a lot of big right hands, that is what I mean. Pantoja just finds himself not there. He cuts good enough angles. One of two things could end up happening. He hasn't landed clean, and there are a couple of rounds in, and he's now whiffing on a couple, and he's a little bit more tired, and the grappling exchanges are not necessarily becoming super favourable for Pantoja, but he's having a little bit more success than he did in the first round, where he's a little bit fresher and stronger, and now he's having to think a little bit where Pantoja's just in his world. Or, alternatively, I don't know, now I'm thinking about it.
No two fights are the same.
I don't know. My second point to that was he does just have to be careful of that, I think. That's the main concern, is if he just keeps giving the same looks and Pantoja's just a little bit too smart to it, he may just get a touch tired. And even if it's just 1%, you don't want Pantoja on your back because he can potentially overextend. And Pantoja just needs a look at that shoulder, and he's wrapping up next to get on backs, and he's a flipping problem when he's there with ground and pound and submissions and just a ferocious pace. So I'm leaning towards the champ on that one for sure.
What outcome? How we're talking decision, submission? Because it's going to be one of the two. I don't see a knockout. I'm going to go
decision.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I think, I mean, we can talk about the one we did mention earlier, Brandon Royval versus the impressive, surging Joshua Van. And as much as I like the latter, and I'm a huge fan of him, and I think he will go on to do incredible things in this division and in this sport, I do think this is going to be one of those cases where experience is going to prevail here. Brandon Royval is, a dog in many ways, an absolute beast in the cage, and he's kind of in a lot of ways like Pantoja, will just take the fight to anyone. And was it Charles Johnson moving like Yoel Romero? I've used that clip so many times in my videos. But
Raw Dog.
Apologies. Yeah, Raw Dog. Yeah, that is his nickname, isn't it, Brandon Royval? So most fitting. But I think, was it Charles Johnson, as I said, who bested Joshua Van a few fights ago? Really showed that experience, and
correct.
I feel like it's going to be a similar story in that regard. I think Royval is just going to big brother him a little bit, and it's necessary in the same way that Peyton Talbot had it done to him by Barcelos, and the former is also fighting on Saturday night, and we can get talking about him pretty soon. I think it's going to be the similar story here for Joshua Van, but it's not going. It's going to be a learning lesson. We'll call it that. I think a decision win, convincing one at that for Brandon Royval.
I could put Royval skill for skill there with anyone, just in regards to paths to victory, because he can do a lot. And if he's on, he's very, very on. It's not always the case, and that's why it's a little bit of a toss-up sometimes. I'd like to see.
That's a good point.
I know for a fact what version I'm going to get every single time, because if that's the case, I think it becomes a lot more of a confident pick and everything. But with that said, I definitely am backing the skills of Royval, just in regards to a little bit more experience and a few more ways to win. And then on the flip side, my head just says there is something to be said for momentum and knockout momentum. And what happens if they just get into a bit of a fun scramble and the crowd gets a little bit lively and there was a fun fight for them and Royval starts getting into it a little bit and Joshua Van's flowing with confidence because he's fighting 10 times a year or whatever it is. And he's just bought his mum a house. He's just bought his mum a house, right? He's probably signed a new contract. He's probably getting, I'm guessing, $250,000. He's playing with house's money and he's just coming off a win. And they say to him, listen, here's a 7-fight deal. We're going to pay you $250 flat for now, maybe with a win bonus after this. $250. He's just sorted his family out for life. And he's going in there with a rush of blood. I don't know, It's a tough one because Royval's got to stand on his spot and Joshua Van. So I'm betting more on the skill set this side because that's the probability. But my heart thinks, I don't know. He might just go out and flip and do something crazy.
I mean, you're right in a way. Momentum's a big thing in this sport. It can just take you to places. It can elevate you perhaps beyond your standard, your normal standard, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That could be the case for Joshua Van. And I'm just looking at his fight record now. You're talking about his activity, right? His last loss was in July of 2024, so a bit under a year ago, and that was to Charles Johnson. This would be, if you include this fight coming up,
2 years.
No, six fights. 6 fights ago. Inside a year. 6 fights in a year. That is absurd. And you're right, as you said.
8 fights in 2 years.
8 fights in 2 years. That is incredible activity, and especially in a sport which, as we said earlier, is so unpredictable, throws so many curveballs, and is so unforgiving and unpunishing, not just inside of the cage, but all of the steps leading up to a fight outside of it, training camp, nutrition, teams, everything. There's so many factors and moving pieces and moving parts that just create that is this aura of unpredictability that can affect a fighter. And to be able to fight that often, I mean, in a lot of ways, I kind of want to play devil's advocate here, and in saying that could
sure
perhaps bite him in the arse later on. Mileage. We talk about mileage being a big factor. Yeah, he literally did. What is going on? It's crazy. But again, momentum, right? So it could work well in his favor this time.
And what's interesting about Joshua Van is I can't help but always watch his career even closer because that's just a name which is always attached to Lon. It's always attached to Lonnie Kavanagh. People always make those matchups online, those fantasy matchups. People always talk about those names together. People always talk about, the future of the flyweights. Always see those names paired together. And of course, he lost to Charles Johnson, right? So he's done incredible things and he's got some really good wins and he's got a massive opportunity. And I hope he actually goes out there and smashes it, to be honest, because it just builds a bigger fight potentially with Lon because he has a former opponent with Charles Johnson. So there's a mutual test. And that's always great when you're trying to build storylines. It's a mutual test because it says, right, you get a go and you get a go. Who's going to do a thing? And Joshua Van lost. So I'm not going to say, if Lon goes out and wins, it does X, Y, and Z, but it is just an interesting twist to the tale. So I hope he goes out there and absolutely flip it.
Oh, that would be such a good fight. You're getting me excited now. Now you're speaking about it. Shit, that would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, how old's Lon now? They're pretty much, Lon's similar. They're similar ages, right? No?
Yeah,
I mean, obviously Lon's young.
I think 25, mate.
25?
I always ask him. I always forget, to be honest. But
Point stands. Two surging flyweights, right?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about, one
I'm going to go to
Shanghai
fighters. With him.
Are you? Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you said. Of course you are. And I'm assuming that's going to be all across the casuals pages. It better be.
Of course. Way more incentive now as well. Way more incentive now because
indeed.
unlocking YouTube.
It's there, fully
Alhamdulillah.
monetized. If you're not, sorry, I was gonna let you handle it, but it just came to mind. Big step for you now, fully monetized, which means RPMs, CPMs, green dollar signs on the studio tab. And it sounds kind of shallow when I say it like that, but we've said this before. The reality is you've got to treat this more than just a hobby, more than just a job. This is the new framework I'm having. It's now a business.
Yeah.
It's a business. It's something larger, you know. So you got to think bigger picture, and getting monetized is the first step of many. Well, not first step, but it's a big step, you know. So congratulations.
I appreciate it. And you know what I'm like? I move past events very quickly, and I move past achievements or different projects very fast. And it's always just on to the next thing, or it's always a quick reflection. But this, I stared at my YouTube tab for probably 30 minutes collectively the last 2 days. I don't do that with anything because I had that goal on my pin board for 4 years. Get my YouTube to monetization. It was actually 5 years technically. So that's been on my pin board for 5 years, and I finally did it, and I got paid £5 on the first day. On the first day, and
Vindication, mate.
I looked at it and I just thought, now I become unstoppable on this platform because it
Well
just
done.
provides more clarity, it provides more stability, it provides better leads, it provides clearer guidelines, better support systems, better everything, which I always knew was the case. But as we've spoke many times, I wanted to build different brands on different platforms, and it was always very difficult to do both to a decent level and then to get it monetized. But now it is, and I've got a little bit better of an idea of the platform. I'm super happy with that.
Exciting. Yeah, I mean, big inroads. And the same could be said, at least on my end, doing the same thing. You know, very excited this week. I mean, it was meant to be last week, but this video is taking a while, plus just life stuff getting in the way. But we're almost there. The Ngannou video is going to go live on Patreon, hopefully tomorrow. If I can get it done by then. It's just little details here and there to iron out. And I've got to finish the Patreon segment in terms of the sort of promo thing. And then it's going all steam ahead. So we're going to post it on there. The value of early access, and I think that's the one benefit for what the content I make is that because it's infrequent, because it's a much more of an occasion rather than, you know, uploading relentlessly, then there's a lot more appeal to that in signing up to something like Patreon, because you get that 2-week early access period to content. So with that in mind, very excited to see how it progresses. Cautiously optimistic is probably the phrase I'd use, but regardless of how the video performs on YouTube, I think for the first time in a while, obviously the Patreon isn't even launched yet, but I just know where that can end up. And with that in mind, there's a little bit of weight off my shoulders in the sense that with that end goal of Patreon, having a sustainable income from that as well means being guided or penned into a certain area of the YouTube system and way of thinking with how I create my videos means I don't have to do that anymore, right? So I can create more of the stuff I really want to create rather than just a mix of that and what I think is going to do well on YouTube. You know, so it provides that, in a lot of ways, extra creative freedom, which I didn't have before. And I'm already starting to think that way, even if I don't have necessarily the financial means to do so just yet. But I know it will come. But very exciting. So this Ngannou video, I'm not too worried about the YouTube performance on it, to be honest with you. It's just this big step of many. So, but excited to put it out because at the end of the day, I'm also very proud of it as a piece of content. It's some of my best work. I think along with my Volkanovski video, it's interchangeable with that one. I still don't know which one's my favorite, but I've worked very hard on it to just get it right in every aspect. And I think we're almost there, but very, very excited to put it out.
I think that's one of the main things, actually, putting out things that you are excited to put out and you're actually proud of in a certain way. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. But going back to the Patreon, I also have my first 4 free subscribers on there. I have now 4 memberships, technically, which I'm pretty happy with. That's a small step.
Yeah.
And one thing which I have definitely started doing as well, for a number of reasons, I've dropped drastically down my scale and then just increase the quality of the videos, which I prefer to do now anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm
Like me.
already seeing the benefits of that, I believe. Now, I had spent 3, almost 4 years building it up in a different way. So I didn't necessarily start with that content, if that makes sense. But there are essences of it. This is what I always say to you. It's funny. I've seen so many times the comment of, "Oh, I like your new setup." I say, my friend, I've had this setup since lockdown. That is 2021. I built this studio with my bare hands, boy, in lockdown, which always makes me laugh. But yeah, so it's a bit of an intense one because one we've spoke about before as well, which has just become monetized, and I'm seeing the potential in that platform is Facebook, one that we've spoke
Yeah,
about
we said, yeah.
before. It's impressive. I didn't really ever consider it that closely just because I know Instagram pays zero. So I just thought it wasn't going to be anything substantial, anything decent, or anything at all. My friend told me about people he knew that were earning decent incomes on Facebook just alone, 6 figures just alone. Obviously, more extreme example, but I started to look at it. And then I realized, oh, I've got 11,000 followers on Facebook, which is quite a lot. And then, oh, okay, it just got monetized. And okay, now I can see what ones are performing better. I'll post more of those type interview ones. And then all of a sudden, it's making a little dollar here, $2 there, $6 there, $8 there, $8 there a day.
Passive.
And it, passively, and it does slowly add up. So
Yeah.
Facebook is definitely one to at least
Consider,
just having
something I need to make inroads into.
Just having in the back of your mind. If not, just YouTube Shorts, by the way.
Yeah, that too. But passive is the word I want to use, actually, just with what I wanted to get onto next. Because
quite passive, but yeah.
No, well, yeah. Well, but still, for what I'm about to say, it makes a lot of sense because we spoke before, and I said before about my pivot in content style in terms of, well, you just said quality, not necessarily quality over quantity, but scaling down in the sense, scaling back, focusing on the stuff you really want to make. And with doing that, and that philosophy I had a few months ago, and now really committing to it as I have been the last few months, I'm starting to see it. Financially, it's not there yet, as I said before, but the type of content that has staying power on the platform that just will be constantly watched over time. And just to put this into perspective, because obviously on here we are very transparent about figures and stuff because we're a creative podcast. You know, it's about insight more than anything. It's nothing to boast about. So I haven't uploaded in, I think it's like a month now, not in a month, and my income has not changed over the last month in the sense that it's not gone up or down, right?
Yeah.
So it's nothing crazy. Like I've earned $1,000 from ad revenue without doing a single thing. And this is my point though. So on my last video that I put out, it's still chugging along now. Still. So this was exactly the plan with it. It didn't start or explode to begin with. And at the first I was like disappointed because in a lot of ways I was used to that intense ramp up in views right off the get. And then obviously that disappointment would come where it would quickly slow down. Yeah. Right. So right now this video is on 83,000 views and still climbing. And it's just still chugging along upwards and upwards and upwards. And with a 37-minute runtime, you know, the RPM is sitting at like sort of a comfortable £5-6, I think. And it's getting, right now it's on about 100 views an hour. So and that adds up, right? So if you have a few of those videos, this is my point. This is the end goal with the channel.
Compounds.
That compounds, right? And obviously on top of the Patreon, that's a constant flow. So I would say the actual, if we're talking about pure financial numbers, the start of this year, the first half of this year, I should say, because we're in June now, hasn't been great. It hasn't. Like, I have actually had a massive dip in subscribers as well. I don't earn that many subscribers, and that comes with less uploads. So I'm, again, not too worried about it either. And financially, you could say the same thing, but I think where we could end up at the end of this year is very exciting. And because I've realized it is less about the subscribers, it's about how passionate your core audience is. And I feel like I have a very strong core group of viewers. And the guy I'm working with on the Patreon, we were just talking back and forth the other day, and he said, looking at your content, looking at your comments, if you look how many positive comments there are, particularly the ones of stuff like, I watch your videos when I'm eating dinner. That's like the highest praise you could receive, because those people there, they have an expectation of your videos. They know the value it brings, that they chose your video to pick or watch it while eating their dinner, because that is almost a sacred ritual for so many people, right? It's cracking on a YouTube video on the TV or the phone while they eat their food. So that's almost like a reflection of where my audience sits, I think, and the value that I provide with my content. So I'm with that in mind, I'm very excited to launch the Patreon. I can't wait. So soon it's coming. I'm excited, nervous but excited.
I think one thing you said there, which is important to highlight, is understand the importance of a core audience. The reason I say that is because a couple of people have said to me, "Oh, you've nearly hit 100k," or "Oh, you're gonna do anything when you hit 100k." Not that it's a massive deal, but obviously you build up over time. It looks like a bit of a milestone on a platform, and at the end of the day, it's exactly what you said. You get to this point where you totally understand it's a vanity metric. To some extent, it's not, of course, but it is.
Yes.
For the most part, what you really want to garner is a core audience, whatever that looks like. And the saying goes, you need 1,000 true fans. And that's really what you're actually looking to curate. And you realize that the vanity metrics to subscribers, the followers, things of that nature, views even to a certain extent, all kind of dwindle into irrelevancy. And you actually care more about how invested can you get a small bunch of people. And then that small bunch of people probably becomes less people. Because once you get 1,000 true fans that buy into whatever you are selling, whatever that may be, whether it's content, whether it's media, whether it's a product, whatever it may be, then that's when it really starts to click, and that's when it can really compound. So yeah, I'm definitely with you on that 100%. I've definitely seen that sort of shift as well. And it also is just convenient that I've been able to build up a vanity metric like 100k on Instagram or 200k almost on TikTok, because they serve a purpose 100%.
Yes,
But
they do, especially for you.
internally, from a business perspective, they don't serve much financial purpose at all. And that's really what everything comes back to. How can everything serve to be leveraged? And it can't be leveraged. It can obviously be leveraged with brands and things of that nature. But I mean, fully transferable straight away, not always. So yeah, bit of a
Yeah,
tangent, but
money, as shallow as it sounds, does. No, you're right. It does allow you to do those things. And we always talk about it being about time, right? Frees up the time. You can use money to free up more of your time to do the things you actually want to do. And that's obviously the end goal of what I'm trying to do with the Patreon. Having that extra financial branch and stability means I can start hiring people. I can get a brand manager. I can get an editor. I'm currently commissioning a thumbnail right now for my latest video, and I have been for the last couple. And I probably will for my next one, working with a really cool designer. So the end goals are exciting. As you said, treating it more like a business than a job or a hobby. And I never treated it like a hobby. I always said from the get, when I first started, I wanted to do this as a career. But now to see that wider scale, it's only the last couple months really hit me as I've sort of rewired my brain. I said, okay, this can be way bigger than I think. And I think AdSense, the limiting nature of AdSense and its volatility, just that dawned on me that was the case. And I was like, okay, we need to think bigger to make this more plausible long term. So it's exciting, scary, as I said, but exciting in so many ways.
I think that's a good place to round up, because I've got a toe wrestling championship call.
More toe wrestling. I was about to say you should get you were doing some shadow boxing in many ways. Do people do that with the toes?
No,
they
you just
start swinging the feet around?
I don't know, but maybe they start. I think it's more stretches and exercise and building up the strength within it.
Hey, it's an evolving sport. You never know. Maybe it'll become a thing. Maybe there's some science behind it.
No, there's infinite science behind it. I actually realized, weirdly, that our sport is actually going to become one of the most influential in all modern day sports. That's what I've realized about toe wrestling. It's mental. When I actually realized, I didn't realize this angle before, but now I actually realize it, because every single sport pretty much involves the feet as a core aspect of the rooting to the ground, the stability, the balance, the strength, the leading up to the glutes and the hamstrings, which implement the core strength and can manipulate the core strength, can manipulate posture, can manipulate balance, can manipulate risk of injuries. I'm realizing that is arguably the most important aspect to every sportsman. And now we're going to start working. Actually. No, I'm 100%. I've seen it way more, and I've thought about it way more. And I've seen the people that have started to take over. Knees over toes guy. Look at the people he's working with. Like infinite sportsmen. It's mental.
Imagine toe wrestling impacting how we train MMA down the line. You never know.
I do
You
know.
never know.
It's obvious. That's exactly what's going to happen.
And that's probably a good, I mean, I don't disagree, and that's probably a good mic drop moment to end it on. This has been the MMA Careers Podcast episode number 108. Thank you very much for listening and or watching, and we will see you pretty soon. Have a good one.